Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Today we have Jake Waters on the program. Like me, he was born into the lighting industry. His father was a branch and then general manager of a showroom in the Detroit area. He worked there a bit as a kid. He went to high school, and then during high school, he helped set up his father's 10,000 square foot showroom in Central Florida. So he's handled a lot of lights in his time. Um, when he moved out to California, where his wife is from, and returned to opportunities in lighting. So today he's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the concerns. And Jake, thank you for joining us. But before we get to our interview with Jake Waters, Greg, we want to talk about grip lock. Get a grip on grip lock. Get grip lock systems.
Hey, that's right. Where it stops, it locks. And that's a labor saving installation, tool free adjustability. When you put on this cable to hang basically anything, we talk about lighting a lot, but it requires no tools. You can adjust it up and down or up as often as you'd like. It's been tested, insured by their factory with qualified engineers, and got everything you need to hang a light. You don't need a chain. Chains suck. Grip lock.
Jack chain is for losers. Okay, folks, if you're listening to this, Jack chain is for losers. Go to griplocksystems.com. That's griplocksystems.com. Check them out. And remember, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, Greg, where it all started, where it continues to roll. What a great convention we had just last week. All our friends were there. Not all of our friends. Some of our friends couldn't make it. But we're moving next year's convention to September, Greg.
Yep,
Decided.
they're all going to make it
or,
this time.
Or maybe October, but probably September. And it's going to be in St. Paul again. We're going to put on a sequel because this year was so good. We want to do it twice at the St. Paul Hotel in Minnesota. So pencil it in, folks. Next September, be in St. Paul, Minnesota, where all the cool kids are going to be. Jake Waters, welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right. So, Jake, you reached out after you listened to one of our podcasts called Just a Hook. That's where we actually had a facility engineer on the show talking about lighting and how it can be a pain and how difficult it might be to replace down the road. One area that you talked about specifically is recessed can lighting and how you have a solution or you have an idea on how that can be done and replaceable without a bulb. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I've listened to a lot of your guys' podcast, and it's nice to hear other people worried about the same things that I'm like worried about. And I think, am I crazy for worrying about this? Nobody else probably cares. And then I listen to you guys, and like, oh, there are a few other people out there that think about this stuff. And yeah, you kind of like touched on a few of your different podcasts about the integrated like LEDs and sort of that push to change the LED, which was great for the energy savings, but the unintended consequences of that down the road. And in that specific one, you were talking a lot about the environmental impact. And so my last, like where I currently work and my last employer, like the environmental impact was something that both like ownership teams really thought a lot about. And so that is kind of like what fired me up to reach out and send that email to you. And on that particular episode, you were talking to a facility building maintenance like manager, and about how in the old days you would just replace the light bulb when it went out, and everyone kind of knew like light bulbs go out, and the maintenance guy would have them on the shelf, and he'd run put a new one in. Like whoever the secretary would be like, "There's a bulb out on floor 16," yada yada yada. But it's not that easy nowadays. And then you guys spoke about like the wasted time, the wasted energy in terms of like labor, and then having essentially integrated fixture that you're now just putting into a landfill. And so that's where I was like, hey, the company I currently work for, we have a module system that replaces like those that basically kind of acts a lot like a light bulb, like an incandescent. It mimics that in terms of if something goes wrong with the module, you just pull the trim down, pop out the module, put a new one in, and you're good to go. And the other half that I was also my previous place, it was all landscape lighting and it was all copper based. And when I was there, it was always like all the plastic stuff that I installed literally as when I worked at and ran our family showroom. We would do installation of landscape lighting, and those plastic ones that would fail, you would just throw them away, and they would just fill up that landfill. Where like when you use
Hang on.
copper or
I
aluminum,
want to
it's
go back. I want to go
very
back to
recyclable.
some. Hang on a second here, Jake. You're
Yeah,
going along. We flicked the talk switch. Somebody's talking
yeah.
to Jake about
I went.
lighting. Oh my God, he's so excited. He wants to lay it all out there right off
Yeah,
the bat. Let's address the first issue you brought up, okay? Which is that your company sells a product where you can just swap out the module, okay? But
yeah.
there's one thing that you're missing when you say that, okay? And you have to remember that when that maintenance guy goes to the shelf to get the light bulb,
Hmm.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter whose brand of light bulb is there. It could be
This is
GE, it
true.
could be Sylvania, it could be Philips, it could be Standard, it could be ICO, it could be
Yeah,
Satco, it could be Keystone. It doesn't matter. Everything was in the form factors built for replaceability with a secondary developed, strong, resilient secondary parts market supporting the end user.
yeah.
This
No,
is a
I agree,
what you're talking about is manufacturer support like a vehicle. So an Audi's muffler cannot go in a BMW's muffler or a GM muffler or whatever. And so this drives an increase in cost to the end user. And so while I applaud your company for offering after sale support, that is not the solution to the problem that you put on the
well,
table.
no, and the solution would really be like for us, like the North American governments basically forcing a standard, like a standard, whether it be on the quick connect or whatnot, so it's universal. It would more likely probably happen in the EU first, um, and then probably transition overseas, like in time. But
Yeah,
yeah, that
that's the
standard really
EU's
should
number.
be
Hang
universal.
on. That's the EU's export. Okay, so you ask what America and China making the export products to one each other. Canada digs up the earth and
Yeah,
puts it on trains and sends it to other countries, right? We all export and import. What the EU exports is bad standards, and the United States has to start coming up with its own standards, okay, and not being told what to do by Brussels. So I would challenge the lighting industry right now. The people, I'm not going to say any names, Greg, or of institutions out there that are responsible for this, but you have dropped the ball 100%. Let me make myself clear. What Jake is saying is correct. You're going to get told what to do by bureaucrats in Brussels. In Brussels.
yeah. It would be great if Canada, Mexico, and the United States all came up with a standard, and then they were the first ones, and they're like, "Hey, this is what it's going to be at this time." I believe most of the world would follow, over the course of time. Um, but without that, you're going to have exactly what happened when you were talking to that building maintenance guy. It's just
Check. No,
a
it's not.
unintended
That's not an
consequence.
if. That's not an if.
Yeah, it
That's
literally is
already
happening.
happening. That's already
Yeah,
happening. This is a catastrophe. Okay?
yeah.
This is a
There's so much
catastrophe.
wasted parts and time.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
I
these are
fully agree.
and put forth by people that are talking about environmentalism and climate change. Like that, all of
Yeah,
this was done in the name of environmentalism and climate change and sustainability. And this is the most unsustainable catastrophe that I have ever seen that was implemented by so many different nonprofit and government agencies and forced into the lighting industry. And the lighting industry standards and the guidance from the other organizations, you failed.
we when I go to the shows, like when I was at Education, they were talking about the next generation of the government's coming to reduce the energy cost. And again, the first thing they're looking at are the lights. And it's like, okay, like great, but you're going to have to put some sort of this is exactly how it has to be done, like universal script. Otherwise, like whether it's my company or your company or his company, we're all going to be left to our own to try to like just do it so it meets whatever you write down. And then you'll have the vast majority where no one's thinking about the future. I
Guess
mean,
what?
it
I'll t-
literally
Let me tell you a
that's what we
story.
were
Let
talking
me tell
about
you a
in
story.
education.
My wife's uncle was a like um, a guy in the auto industry, like a kind of an auto industry. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say what he was, but he knew what was happening in the auto industry in North America between Detroit and Ontario, like that area, the Rust Belt they call it now. That's a Rust
Yeah,
Belt in
I
the
grew up there.
States.
Very
Ontario's still
familiar.
kicking ass and taking names, okay? But you guys went into a Rust Belt, we didn't. But anyway, that whole area of the Midwest and Ontario and New York and Pennsylvania, and that they call that area the Rust Belt or whatever. A lot of money was made on cars there. And when the guys went in 2008, my wife's uncle was still alive, to fly into Washington to beg the country for money. They flew their private jets to Washington to beg for middle class people's money. When these jackasses did that, okay, so embarrassing for the nation, But when they did that, I asked my uncle, "What the hell's wrong with these companies?" You know what he said to me? He said, "Nobody at any of those companies in senior management knows how to make a car."
It's true. Furthermore, they're only
But
worried
nobody.
about
And the follow-up
3 to
point to
6
that,
months from
Jake,
now.
the follow-up point is that nobody setting any of these standards knows anything about lighting. They don't know anything about lighting.
They probably I've never thought about it, but it's a great comparison because just like the problem we have, those same people in the automobile industry, they only care about the next quarter or 6 months.
They're
They're
bean
not worried about
counters.
5 years from
They're
now. Yeah,
accountants.
they're not worried about 10 years from now when the LED fixture is going to fail, and then you're having them fail intermittently, and you got thousands of them in your building. Yeah,
And this one's
yeah,
out, that one isn't. What do you do? This is Jake Waters
it,
raises the black
so
curtain on the lighting industry here, right? Like,
so, but like I said, I think about these things, and that's why I like listening to your guys' podcast because, like, oh, somebody else actually thinks about this too. Because sometimes I think, like, man, I'm just too concerned about like my own work and whatnot. But when I listen and hear others like bring it up, it makes me feel a little more normal. Maybe I don't know, a
you
little
know
less
what,
Yeah,
obsessed. Maybe.
Greg, I got to jump in here too. I got to come again because I'm hot right now. I'm pissed off about this.
I see
Remember what
that.
I told you I was going to talk about in the podcast? What we're going to do alone?
Hmm.
I'm going to do it right now with Jake. This complex has a name. Okay, this complex I'm referring to, that dictates lighting policy from the ivory tower while knowing nothing about how the lighting industry works, or what's best for the end user customers, or what's environmentally efficient, or what is sustainable. They know nothing about any of those topics. Zero. This is the lighting industry deep state. These people make millions of dollars doing nothing for the industry. In fact, not only do they not do nothing, Greg, all of these nonprofit accreditation agencies and label makers, lighting industry label makers on the side of the box, and this is the deep state. This is what people talk about with the deep state. These people have no stake in the industry. They don't care, and they're out to make a quick buck.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I worked at the landscape manufacturer, and you would talk about dark sky compliance and how it went from something good to a pure like sort of manipulation for a company to make money. It's just like what are we doing here? Like we're we don't we're, now this is about making money and not actually about helping the environment.
Yeah, that's what all these things are about. Whenever you hear anybody, like at this point in time, if I hear anybody that works for a nonprofit or a government or something come and tell me something about the environment, I know I'm screwed. Like if I get an email from the government saying, "This is the government, this and that, we want to look into mercury-containing lamps," or "We want to look at this CFLs, we want your feedback." I'm like, "Oh, here we go again." Right? And now there's a tax on the lighting industry, and only this nonprofit gets to charge it. Right? Only
Yeah,
this. No, that's not the government. That's a nonprofit. Yeah, but that's how we set it up. And then you go to a
yeah.
competition lawyer and
But
you ask,
the
hang
people
on,
who are out,
let me just finish the
go ahead.
point. I'm like hot today
Yeah.
on this. You go to an antitrust lawyer and you ask them, and they say, yeah, it is kind of antitrust, but you can't do anything about it because they've been chartered by the government.
And that's the other half is people outside the industry literally think those companies are the government. And they're like, no, they're just private companies or nonprofits. They're not the government. But yet everyone just assumes they are like on outside of the industry. And so it's when I explain it to my friends and stuff, they're like, yeah, that sounds horrible. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
This
So it's
is
like,
the swamp. This is the lighting industry deep state.
and
Whatever the term on the conspiracy theories that people are talking about, when they're talking about whatever conspiracy theory, they reference the deep state, right? This is the lighting industry industrial complex. whatever you want to call it, and it surrounds state governments and Washington D.C. and they get policies and all this stuff enacted, and next thing you know, they get to charge 30 cents on every lamp sold in the province.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, to kind of just tie it all back for for me, I've been very grateful that for the last like 5 plus 6 years, I've gotten to work for two different ownership teams that actually do think about and care about the future proofing and the environmental impact. And so at least when I get to go to work, like I'm like I know they're doing things to try to do their best, even within this like crazy chaotic system that is lighting. And that's a whole nother topic when like my friends ask, I'm like, if I sat down and explained to you, I'm like, I need a diagram to map it out how it works because it's overly
Right.
complex. I think I listened to another one where one of your guests was like, we can make it a little bit complex for, so we can be the experts, but like it's overly complex. And I was like, yes, that is the thing I like think about and I so agree with. Could it be more on the same page with anybody ever?
Right. And so going back to kind of that original modularity and fixtures, so you think there's a way we could get to a point where everybody, like in your recess can example, everybody has the same module, just different colors and little
That's what I
different
would, yeah,
efficiencies?
that's what I would hope for. Yeah, different efficiencies, better CRI, that kind of stuff, like maybe different optic options, because like right now we do really well. Is those about they're building like down the road, and there needs to be more companies like us, or that to be the standard to force more companies like us, so we don't have all those other problems, like the people you had on with the room with the light buzzing, where they were trying to like fix an HVAC, and they're like, no way, like that's going to give me epilepsy in that room. Um, Less of that, more of the other.
Yeah, and how would this thing connect? Like, I know it's your company or whatever, but I mean, is it just like
So
a
it's just
GU24 base in a way, or?
yeah, there's a little quick connect. It's just a quick like snap in connect. So you run your regular 120 or 277 to the housing, and then from inside the housing, it's just a quick connect where it just pushes up and in, and then the module basically kind of screws in like a light bulb, and the trim like then it screws into the trim, and the trim pushes up. It's really simplistic, and like I'm amazed that I don't see like the big companies doing the same thing
And why not just
because
do a bulb? Like go incandescent socket,
well,
and
I
you've got
mean
all the flexibility in the world.
it's yeah, I mean it's LED. You know, we have the medium base connectors for the quick connect. That part, I wasn't there at the start with the company when they were engineering it, so never really thought to ask. I just thought this is very useful for like thinking down the road, and that alone like caught my attention. I was like, okay, like yeah, these guys, you know, although small, they're very serious about this, and they've got like something outstanding. But it's a question I probably could ask in our next big group meeting with the head of engineering.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Like,
something
hey,
with to
tell me
do
the
with
history.
efficiencies. Like being separating the driver from the module. I'm sure it makes it brighter and does all that. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
something like
Well,
we almost.
on ours, the driver sits on the module. So if the driver fails, it's just all like one unit. And so, because the driver will be the piece that fits, right? So it's all like right on there. And
Okay.
it limits our lumen, um, as they are like engineering like a higher and higher lumen one as they try to figure out the heat dispersal. But um, but if something goes wrong, it makes it for those like casinos and stuff. They say use it. They have those in their maintenance room with a little placard that says
Greg, what
"Hold
he's
this down."
saying, is that
Mm.
LED lighting is not a mature technology yet, unless it's put into bulb shapes, like you suggested.
And so I'm almost wondering, like, why don't we just go back to that? Is that where we're at? Just
I
let's
I
make all the
think
old fixtures and
when
go back,
I
but
was
making an
listening to
LED
you,
bulb.
I
I
mean,
was listening to you
I would,
guys.
Yeah.
That's a logical outcome. No, go back to
yeah. I mean,
science.
yeah. It's almost like how we see sort of cable TV kind of coming full circle. Like, why not just come full circle in the lighting industry too?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
that's been Jake Waters here on Get a Grip on Lighting. We came out hot there. We really appreciate you listening and following with us, Jake, and on the journey. Thank you for coming on the show, Greg. I got to get a grip on grip lock, man. Jack Cheney's for losers.
That's right. You don't need jack chain. Throw that stuff out. You want tool-free adjustability, easier install, it saves on time, everything that goes along with it, and you can adjust it in the future easily. Jack chain you can't. And go to grip lock.
Don't be a loser. Go to griplocksystems.com and the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's NAILD.org. We had a great convention. Next year it's going to be even better. We were just talking about it on the board meeting yesterday before we recorded this, and yeah, this is going to be a hot ticket next year. This time we got a bunch of other stuff coming out of the Nailed office. Stay tuned, folks. Thanks for listening.